The cabin was calm, bathed in warm daylight as Flight 728 cruised high above the clouds. Most passengers were watching movies, reading books, or drifting into quiet naps. In Seat 8A, a tired single father leaned against the window, his eyes closed, exhausted after weeks of sleepless nights caring for his little daughter while juggling 2 jobs. He looked like an ordinary traveler, just another face in the crowd. But within minutes, a desperate announcement would echo through the aircraft, changing every life on board forever. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, courage, and second chances can change lives, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. Miles Hartley had not enjoyed a full night's sleep in nearly a year. Ever since losing his wife, Clara, to a sudden illness, every responsibility had landed on his shoulders. His 7-year-old daughter, Ivy, depended on him for everything. Every morning began before sunrise with breakfast, school preparations, and long work shifts repairing industrial machinery. Every evening ended with homework, bedtime stories, and quiet moments where he secretly wondered if he was doing enough. The flight that morning was supposed to be a fresh start. They were traveling to another city where Miles had finally accepted a better-paying engineering position, hoping to build a brighter future for Ivy. Across the aisle, Ivy smiled as she carefully colored pictures in a small notebook. She glanced toward her father, happy to see him finally resting. The gentle hum of the engine seemed almost comforting after the difficult year they had survived together. Then everything changed. The calm voice of the captain suddenly came over the speakers, but this time it carried unmistakable urgency. There had been a serious medical emergency involving one of the pilots, and the remaining pilot was struggling to safely manage the aircraft while dealing with worsening weather ahead. The captain asked if there was anyone on board with military combat flight experience who could immediately report to the cockpit. For several seconds, silence filled the cabin. Passengers looked around nervously. Some whispered. Others reached for loved ones' hands. Flight attendants hurried through the aisle with anxious expressions. Then Ivy gently touched her father's arm. Miles slowly opened his eyes. At first, he thought he had been dreaming. But when he heard the announcement repeated, something deep inside him awakened, something he had spent years trying to leave behind. Before becoming an engineer, before becoming a husband and father, Miles had served as a decorated Air Force combat pilot. He had flown dangerous rescue missions in hostile skies, earning medals he now kept hidden inside an old wooden box at home. After losing close friends during his final deployment, he had promised himself never to sit inside another military cockpit again. He had traded adrenaline for family, danger for peace. But today, peace had found him only long enough to remind him of who he once was. Without saying much, Miles stood. He knelt beside Ivy, smiled gently, and squeezed her small hand. She didn't ask questions. She simply nodded, as though she somehow understood her father carried a responsibility greater than fear. A flight attendant quickly escorted Miles toward the cockpit. Inside, the situation was more serious than anyone outside realized. One pilot had become unconscious from a sudden cardiac emergency. The captain remained in control but was fighting heavy turbulence while monitoring complex instrument failures caused by severe electrical disruptions. The moment Miles sat down, years of forgotten training returned almost instinctively. His hands moved with calm precision. His breathing slowed. Every gauge, every warning light, every checklist felt strangely familiar despite the years that had passed. The captain briefly explained the situation, and together they divided responsibilities. Outside, dark storm clouds towered ahead like mountains. Inside the passenger cabin, uncertainty spread with every unexpected movement of the aircraft. Parents hugged children. Couples silently prayed. Even those who had never believed in miracles found themselves hoping for one. Miles focused only on the instruments before him. He remembered something an old instructor once told him: true courage isn't the absence of fear, it is doing your job while fear sits beside you. The aircraft entered violent turbulence. Warning alarms sounded repeatedly. Rain hammered against the windshield. Lightning flashed across the sky. For nearly 30 exhausting minutes, Miles and the captain worked together with complete concentration, communicating through every adjustment as they guided the aircraft around the worst of the storm while preparing for an emergency landing at the nearest international airport. Air traffic control cleared every runway. Emergency vehicles lined the pavement below. Thousands watched from the terminal windows without knowing the remarkable story unfolding above them. Finally, the runway appeared through the heavy rain. The descent felt endless. Every heartbeat seemed louder than the engines. The wheel struck the runway harder than normal before bouncing once. Then twice. Miles steadied the controls while the captain corrected the landing angle. The aircraft settled firmly onto the ground. Brakes roared. Passengers held their breath. Seconds later, applause erupted throughout the cabin as the plane rolled safely to a stop. Many passengers cried openly. Some embraced complete strangers. Others simply sat in stunned silence, overwhelmed by relief. When the cabin door finally opened, paramedics rushed aboard to care for the unconscious pilot, whose condition later stabilized thanks to the crew's quick response. Most passengers never learned the full story. To them, the quiet man from seat 8A had simply disappeared toward the cockpit and somehow brought them safely home. As people exited the aircraft, many stopped to thank Miles personally. He accepted every handshake with humility, insisting the captain deserved equal credit. Reporters waiting inside the terminal soon discovered who he was. His story spread rapidly across news outlets. Not because he had once been a decorated combat pilot. Not because he had saved nearly 200 lives. But because, after everything he had lost, he had still chosen service over fear. Days later, Miles returned to ordinary life. He still packed Ivy's lunches. Still fixed broken machines. Still read bedtime stories every night. Yet something had quietly changed. His courage inspired thousands of people around the country. Veterans reached out with messages of gratitude. Young people wrote letters saying they wanted to serve others with the same quiet strength. A scholarship fund for military families was even established in his honor, though Miles insisted every donation should help children who had sacrificed alongside their parents. One evening, Ivy asked her father why everyone kept calling him a hero. Miles smiled. He told her heroes aren't people who never become afraid. Heroes are ordinary people who remember what matters most when everyone else is losing hope. Years later, Ivy would remember that flight not because of the storm, the headlines, or the applause. She would remember seeing her exhausted father wake from an ordinary nap and quietly become extraordinary when the world needed him most. If this story touched your heart, please write in the comments, ordinary people can do extraordinary things. We'd love to hear where you're watching from as well. And if this story reminded you that courage, kindness, and hope still exist in our world, please like this video, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Every interaction helps these uplifting stories reach someone who may need a little hope today. Sometimes, the greatest heroes aren't wearing uniforms anymore. Sometimes they're simply sitting quietly in seat 8A, carrying invisible scars, loving their children with all their hearts, and waiting for the one moment when life calls them to rise again.